What's up, Techno fam? Chanda D, your Techno Dad here, and I hope everybody had a great New Year's weekend. I was DJing at the ski resort, and it was pretty awesome. Had a great time, and I want to start off the year with a little controversy. All right, so we'll get into it right after the jump. And I am back. Before we begin, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to all my patrons on Patreon. You guys rock. Thank you guys so much for impacting the channel in a positive way. And if you'd like to become a patron and support what I'm doing here on YouTube, make sure you check the link down in the description and become a patron today. All right, so today we're going to talk about bad Atmos. Bad Atmos. Bad. Naughty Atmos. Shouldn't be doing that. So what makes Atmos bad? Now, we already know a few reasons why Atmos is bad. Bad in the sense that it's not a good experience because the mixing wasn't done properly, right? Bad Atmos mixes are pretty much, I'd say about 80 to 85% of the movies released in Atmos have a non-existent to a pretty bad Atmos mix. And that's for a number of reasons, mainly time and budget. The studio has deadlines to hit, so if there is like some post-production that's taking a little bit longer, then they're probably going to not have enough time to send everything to the Atmos mixer, and they, just don't have time. And the second one is budget. Maybe they do have the time, but they don't want to spend, on the Atmos mixing engineer for a month. They'd rather, 2 weeks. One of the things I hear a lot on the internet is that, the director really didn't want that much Atmos. And frankly, the director is not involved in the Atmos mix at all. It is the Atmos mixing engineer. All the height effects, it's just up to what they feel like doing at the time and with the time that they are allotted. So the Atmos engineers I've spoken to, they'll get a 7.1 mix already from the studio. And, they'll have all the sound effects and all that kind of stuff on stems. And they will, pan the sounds around and all that kind of stuff. So that's another issue, is that the director really isn't involved unless it's a movie that was released, like 300. It was released previously. It's an older movie. It got a 4K release with an Atmos mix, and that Atmos mix is stellar. Stellar. I still got halfway to go through the movie, but I am making a video about Dolby Atmos in that movie 300. It's just fantastic. So you have situations like that where it's an older movie and they're putting it into 4K. And even though there's a little graininess, I know you grain hater 4K people are out there. I see you. But the Atmos mix is really good. So, those kinds of situations do arise, and the studio or whomever is in charge of getting it from 1080p to 4K is like, hey, let's make this Atmos actually sound really good. So maybe in that situation, somebody is with the Atmos mixing engineer, like saying, okay, let's try to do this and that and whatever. But for the most part, director's not there. They don't want to deal with that. So this is what we've known about, why Atmos is bad. And I want to shed light on something that a lot of people don't really talk about a whole lot. And it's something that I noticed with my system. So let's take a quick jaunt down memory lane. I believe it was somewhere around 2017 when I picked up my first Atmos modules. It was the Klipsch 140 SAs, the little speaker toppers. So I had them as speaker toppers for a few days, I think. I was just trying to watch as much Atmos movies as I could, and I couldn't really get the effect. My ceiling is sloped, and there are beams that run across it. So I was like, hey, let me mount these toppers up here. So I did that. Totally blew my mind, right? Totally about it, because now I could actually hear something, because the bouncy ceiling thing just didn't work in my space. And I've heard systems where it totally works. So it's not a thing that it doesn't work, but in my space, it's better to just mount the speakers. So I had a basic Dolby Atmos setup, a 5.1.2. And for those of you that don't know, that's 5 ear level speakers, 1 subwoofer, and then 2 height channels, which are the Klipsch toppers that I mounted to the beam that runs across my ceiling. One of my favorite Dolby Atmos demos is called Audiosphere, and I was using it a lot when I was checking out my Dolby Atmos setup and kind of dialing things in. And when I moved from 5.1.2 to 5.1.4, I swapped out the Klipsch for SVS Prime Elevation speakers, and instead of just replacing the two, I replaced the two up front, and then I added 3 more because I also added the Voice of God channel for a 10.1 Auro 3D setup. But we're not talking about that today. We're talking about moving from 5.1.2 to 5.1.4. Now, when I played my favorite Atmos demo again, Audiosphere, I noticed there were more sounds up above in the back, right? Because the rear height is already there. But it was definitely different than listening to it in 5.1.2. So I went into the Denon and turned off the rear heights. And that's when I noticed that I still hear those sounds, but those sounds are now in my surrounds. So the rear height, if you don't have them, those sounds that are supposed to be up there are now down below. Since my main listening position is butt up against the wall, I can't really put surround back there. It'd be a little too tight, and I don't think I would get good effects because I couldn't put it at ear level. So then I also came to realize whatever sounds were supposed to be in the surround back are also now in the side surrounds. So if you're rocking a 5.1.2 Dolby Atmos setup, you are hearing things way differently than someone that has a 7.1.4 setup. Now, this all goes back to the fact that Dolby Atmos is object-based as opposed to channel-based, meaning no matter what Dolby Atmos setup you have, 5.1.4, 7.1.2, 9.1.6, whichever, Dolby Atmos is going to place those objects in the same 3D space because it kind of matrixes to whatever system you have, right? The problem is if the mixing engineer is setting up the mix on a 7.1.4 setup and you're listening back on a 5.1.2 setup, your side surrounds are now doing the work of 3 different speakers: the side surrounds, the surround back, and the rear height. So you're getting all those 3 things folded, as I like to call it, I don't know if that's actually a term, into the side surrounds. So what does that mean as far as your movie watching experience? Let me tell you. If you have something flying over, plane, helicopter, whatever, it's flying right overhead, right? If the Atmos mixing engineer has a 7.1.4 setup, he's going to make it go across all 4 height channels. Now, since you only have 2 height channels, the sound is going to go from up top here and then immediately whoop, go over. The plane just hid right behind your head. You get it? Because the sound that should have been in the rear heights is now in your side surrounds. So that sound of the plane is coming up and then just diving right behind your head. And I noticed this on a few different demos, and I'm like, oh, well, this is interesting. So I would go in and I would turn off the rear heights and listen to the demo, turn on the rear heights again, listen to the demo again. So what does this mean? Does this mean that the Dolby Atmos film that you're watching, does that need to be optimized for each different Dolby Atmos setup? Meaning, if the Dolby Atmos mixing engineer has a setup that is higher numbers than yours, let's say it's a 9.1.6, and puts stuff, in the middle of the ceiling off to the right above your head, is that just going to land down at your shoulder because you're listening back on a 5.1.2? You get what I'm saying here? I want you guys to chime in and comment and let me know what you think. And you can try this out on your own system as well. If you got 4 height channels, turn off the rear heights and then listen to the same scenes and see what happens. Turn off your surround back, see what happens, because you'll notice exactly what I'm noticing as well. If you were a mixing engineer, or if I was doing the mixing, I'd be like, okay, I would want to mix in 5.1.2, then I would want to mix in 5.1.4, and then put out another mix in 7.1.2 and 7.1.4, so that it covers everybody that's going to watch the content. But of course, as we talked about before, studios don't really have the time, nor do they want to put the budget in for a proper 7.1.4 mix. Do you think they're actually going to have somebody optimize for every different Dolby Atmos setup? I don't think so. And this is where I think Dolby Atmos is bad in a sense, because if you don't have at least 4 height channels, you're not getting the same experience as your neighbor. Not your neighbor. Your neighbor probably doesn't have a home theater, but if they do, your friend, neighbor, relative, whomever, they will be experiencing the movie in a different way because they have all the channels available. You don't. And so you're going to be now listening to things in your side surrounds that should be up above you. And you're also going to be listening to sound effects and whatever in your side surrounds that are supposed to be in your rear surrounds, the surround back. And this is something that, home theater YouTube channels don't really talk about because they all have 4 height channels and surround backs. It's just my dumb luck that I started with the 5.1.2 and moved to 5.1.4, and that's kind of where it's at. Down here in the studio, I got 7. 7 ear level, and I can totally hear a difference. In 300, in Midway, all these movies sound totally different in here because I have surround back. And this is what I wanted to bring to the forefront as we start off 2022, that we need to understand exactly what's going on with Dolby Atmos. And if you think this matrixing thing is good, it's probably great. If you have a 13 or 15 channel Dolby Atmos setup and the mixing engineer is mixing on a setup that's 11 channels, then you're probably fine. However, if the mixing engineer is mixing the content on an 11 channel setup and you're watching it back, playback is on a 7 channel setup, it's going to sound different. 100%. 100% it's going to sound different if they actually put stuff in the surround backs and in the rear heights, which I would imagine they would, depending on the movie. And then, of course, depending on if it's a good Atmos mix or not. These are all factors in what makes Dolby Atmos good and what makes Dolby Atmos bad. So please let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. What Dolby Atmos configuration are you guys rocking? Are you at a 5.1.2? Are you at a 9.1.6? Let me know in the comments and let me know what you think. And you know what? Go ahead and try it out. Turn off your surround back, turn off your rear heights, and watch the same scenes, turn them on again, and see if you notice the difference. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Me.